Hi everyone, my name is Ashtongleckman and welcome to this very special interview with Johnnie Burn, the Academy Award nominated sound designer behind The Zone of Interest, the recent film by Jonathan Glazer. Other films he's worked on includes Under the Skin, The Lobster, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, as well as Jordan Peele's film Nope, and recently Poor Things. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to him about his process in creating the visceral soundscape of The Zone of Interest. Because we never go into the camp of Auschwitz, we only hear what's going on, and his incredible sound design instantly immerses you in that world and the darkness of what happened in history. So I'm so looking forward to talking with him about his process, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, Johnnie, for being here.
Ashton, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's an honor.
And let's not forget Yorgos's exceedingly high standards of perfection, which meant a very big part of this process was to go to the palace ourselves and discover and record how it sounds.
My mother once said to me, "What do you mean you do the sound on films? They sound all right to me." And I thought, there's a bit to it. It's for me, sound designer. I mean, sound designer can mean guy who does dinosaur noises as a component part of a soundscape, but there's also another more Walter Murch version, which is person responsible for the entire process of how sound is captured on the set and how it is used narratively and emotionally, and even down to how it's played back in the theatre at the end, and how those levels are mixed. So it's someone to work with the director to explore all the potential of sound, basically, in every way.
Did you just look at me? Did you? Look at me! Look at me! How dare you! Close your eyes!
And I've seen a lot of footage of you on set, basically recording the sound for the films that you've worked on. One of my favorites is For the Favorite, the film with Emma Stone, Yorgos Lanthimos, and you're on set and you're in this big, beautiful, real location. And there's also some footage of you like wearing a dress, recording the sounds of the dresses moving. And it has to be an exciting job. It has to be a job that's constantly surprising you in different ways.
Well, totally. I mean, every different film is a huge new set of challenges, and yeah, For the Favorite, wearing a frock was one of them, definitely. But that was all about getting the sound right. But yeah, no, I mean, it's great fun, isn't it? I was really lucky. I was on a business degree, and I realized that it wasn't making me happy, but I realized I had a bedroom full of electronic musical equipment as a kid, and so by chance I kind of dropped out of the degree and got a job in a studio and sort of never looked back. So I guess it's fair to say I've never worked a day in my life.
And one of the things that's interesting about you is that you aren't only a sound designer on many of the films you work on, you also are the dub engineer, you're the re-recording mixer, meaning that you're the person bringing all of the sound elements together. What is the difference for you working on a film where you're just the sound designer versus being the guy in the end that brings all the elements together?
Well, a lot of that goes to do with my approach in general. A lot of the reasons why you do have a separate sound designer, sound editor, Foley editor, dialogue editor, and then a mixer is because traditionally all those people work on different machines, and then they bring them and plug them together on the mixing desk. And at that point of the final mix, they will then bring all the elements together and the score and everything else. But the software I use is less conventional, but it allows many thousands of tracks. And I tend to work on projects over a longer period of time. So I work with a team of first and second assistants. And basically, from the beginning of the beginning of working on the film, we're working on the final mix as a sculpture from the beginning. So there isn't a point of time where we sit down and say, this is now the final mix. It's all about placing elements in and having their volume and tonality correct, when they go in or adjusted, and a constant moving thing. So for me, I actually see re-recording mixer as, part of the sound design process of, but I guess it's also because I spent my first 10 years working on commercials. And in commercials, you are the guy who has to do everything because you don't know who's going to walk in the door. You have like 3 different sets of clients a day. And one problem might be Foley, another one might be music editing, and another one might be mixing. So you just have to get good at all of it. So because I can do it and I enjoy it, I end up doing all of it. Yeah. But a lot of it is also, Zone of Interest was a year and a half, of of sound design, sound editing, and mixing sort of constantly. And John wants to do all of that together. So it would be a mistake to start editing sound with such subtlety and precision to not be considering the mix of it at the same time, you know.
Have you thought about what animals you want to be if you don't make it?
A lobster.
I'm going to be a parrot if I don't make it. Why don't you become parrots too? And then we'll all be together.
You're a complete idiot.
And one of the things that you've spoken about is, you know, working with Yorgos, and, you know, usually he lets you do your own thing, but you can always tell if something's wrong when he begins, what is it, shaking his leg or basically move. So,
no, so
right. Talk a little bit about
here.
Yeah.
Right, because his leg is quite close to, like, when I turn around, but I can see it out of the corner of my eye. I'll know if I play him something, and I can just see kind of that happening, you know, just gently, and I'm like, okay, noted, don't need to say anything. But yeah, actually you know, Yorgos is so collaborative and you know, and warm to ideas, and you know, he wants to create a space for all of his collaborators to enjoy working in, and so, you know, he's always said to me, put anything you like in the film, and I'll only tell you when I don't like it. And so, it cuts down on the need for a lot of communication. And he'll get sent stuff, and I'll throw things in the Avid, and he'll always be hearing it. And I'll only have it, you know, if it's wrong, then he'll get in touch. But otherwise, it's all good. So yeah, I love working with him.
A lot of the times talk about on this channel the relationship between a composer and a director. And, you know, when a composer is working with one director versus another, usually it's a little bit, you have to adapt to the situation. For you, what's it like when you're working with Jordan Peele versus when you're working with Jonathan versus when you're working with Yorgos? How is the difference in that relationship, and what are the through lines through the collaboration between every single director you work with?
I mean, yeah, definitely they're all different. You know, Jonathan does want to work together for a lot of the time, and you know, and that'll be, and you are exploring things together, and he definitely wants to see things done in all the different versions of ways it can be done, and he can pivot the whole film on a good idea and take us down a month-long avenue of trying something. Yorgos is very, you know, he wants you to enjoy exploring creatively on your own as much as you can, so that not least so that he can go and be prolific, you know, and move on, and yeah, and Jordan is he's scarily technically talented. He's you know, he's a musician, so I was really surprised when I first sat at the mixing desk with him, and his knowledge of how sound works and everything I was like, oh, it's going to be difficult. But yeah, he's also extraordinarily good at writing with sound, you know, and understanding how to get sound out of his pen and use it as a kind of narrative tool. But yeah, in fact, Yorgos and Jordan were both fans of Under the Skin, and that was why, you know, that was the reason I met both of them. So in a sense, they're all the same. But from that, you know, wanting to, understand, you know, enjoying what I suppose Jonathan and I had discovered as a workflow on Under the Skin and how sound might be used.
You don't want to wake up, do you?
Well, and it's interesting too, because Under the Skin was a prelude in many ways to both the audio side and the visual side of the Zone of Interest, because, you know, with Under the Skin, there was the van scene. And of course, Jonathan was experimenting with using these hidden cameras that were placed all over the place, which he then used on set for the Zone of Interest. Talk to me just a little bit about, I'm so interested in this first conversation between you and Jonathan. He comes to you and says, I'm going to make a film about the commandant of Auschwitz. And what did he say the role of sound was going to play in the experience of the film? How did you react to it?
I reacted with panic pretty much, but we discussed, I know John very well. We've worked together for almost 3 decades. And so in the years following Under the Skin, you know, he was telling me occasionally, I've got a new idea. oh, by the way, it's the Martin Amis book, it's this, you know, read. But then it was probably 2 years before the shooting that I began, that I first got a script, and John called me up and said, you know, have a read. And I haven't really mentioned much sound in the script yet because I don't know how it's going to be portrayed, but I can say that we are never going to go in the camp, and I do not want to show any atrocities, and I think sound is the way that we will do it. And I'm not sure, you know, we're going to have to figure it out. But basically, when I go and film this family drama of people having a nice house in a sort of Disney-esque house with a beautiful garden, he said, you know, I'm going to come back a year later, and you're going to need to be an expert on the sound of Auschwitz, and you are going to need to be able to play me what, for example, 24 hours in Auschwitz would have sounded like, and it needs to be historically accurate and you know, and faithfully represent and with respect to the victims and survivors. So he was he was very clear that, you know, I had my own kind of shoot to do in order to collect the ingredients that we would need to be able to discover together how that would happen.
Das hier ist die Mauer vom Lager. Ja, das ist die Lagermauer. Also da haben wir auch noch Wein gepflanzt, damit das zuwächst, damit man das nicht mehr so sieht. Vielleicht ist ja Esther Siffermann da drüben. Wer war das nochmal? Ja, die, für die ich geputzt habe.
The script didn't really say anything about sound in it. It was just, you know, reading the story unfold as it is, and you know, and obviously it mentioned that you would see the train and you would see the chimney stacks and things like that. And I think it maybe even said at the head of the page, on the page one, you know, throughout this film, we will hear the sound of the camp. But, and my goodness, when we finally got there to the soundscape that we had, it was the difference between sort of, you know, rationally talking about it and theoreticizing and actually witnessing it was extraordinary and way more kind of profound than I had imagined it would have been.
Rudolf Höss is out in the camp, and all we see is his face, but we hear the horror of everything going on around him. But, you know, the camera doesn't pan around and look at what's going on. The sound is all you need. Can you talk just a little bit about the film 1 and film 2 approach and the timeline of when they finished the cut of film 1 with, you know, the visuals of them at a pool party or at a birthday, and then taking that and beginning the work of putting the sound to picture?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was film 1 was the film you see, and film 2 was the film you only hear. And, you know, Sandra and Christian, the lead actors, were telling me how extraordinary it was when they first saw the film, because they, you know, what they had as a filming experience was reasonably pleasant, you know, apart from being at Auschwitz. But you know, they were just being a family, going about their house, and there were 10 hidden cameras, and the takes were an hour long, and there were no crew on set. So John wanted them to really feel like they were a family in 1943, particularly for the younger actors. So it was very much about capturing the sound of people in a house rather than their kind of dialogue so much, which is a sort of a fine line, but a real important point on the whole kind of Big Brother aspect of it. And, you know, everything is in a mid shot. And so really we saw that as film 1, this family drama, and we spent a year in post-production figuring out the picture edit of that and working on the sound of that. And, you know, Tan Villas, the brilliant production sound mixer, recorded 20 different microphones for every take that were kind of hidden in all the different rooms, and because he couldn't have a guy with a boom. So we spent many months, John and I, listening to all the different audio tracks, and if a kid ran out of a room and went round the side of the house, we still wanted to be able to hear that. And so it's that multi-layered thing that gives the whole gives a really cohesive and credible immersion into this is a busy little house having its life. So, and we finished that, and we did a mix of that, you know, here, and we're like, okay, there's film 1. And then John and I went back to the kind of drawing board, and we, you know, opened up another sort of 1,000 tracks on my edit machine and pulled up the library of stuff that my team and I had been working on for about a year and a half now, with research of witness testimony and going out and recording the period specific guns and the correct motorbikes to pass by on the road, but predominantly witness testimony, and visiting places like riots in Paris to record, you know, young French men shouting, or football matches in Germany where 4th Division with no crowd, but just people aggressive with a German intonation, that kind of thing. And just going around Europe, capturing many different sounds. And then yeah, so taking film one and John and I just doing over a period of about 4 months, we went through the film maybe 12 times, I think. And the first pass took about 6 weeks, and we were very carefully, painstakingly put sound in, and then we did another pass, put sound in, and probably the last three passes were more about taking sound out and realizing we had overdone it, basically. But yeah, that was the kind of process. Get film one sorted, and we played that and thought, yeah, this is great. And Mika had written incredible score for that, and you know, and then it was the process of putting the sound of the camp on that kind of bulldozed that out the way a little bit, and gave birth to other ideas like the overture and things like that. But yeah, it was film one was made, and then we went about deciding how to create that constant juxtaposition and attenuate quite how we were going to do that. And it was way more than we had imagined when we began.
The Zone of Interest is not a story in the sense of a normal film. It's about a man who has a lovely life with his family, he's very good at his job, they live in the country, in a lovely house with a lovely garden. He also happens to be the commandant of Auschwitz. Their garden wall was the same wall on the other side that was the death camp. In our early research, the photographs, the Höss family album is in this garden. You see everything. You see pool and the slide and the greenhouse and the rest of it. You never see the wall that abuts the camp.
Can you tell me about the most interesting things that you found in your research of the actual camp? Because obviously, you know, the Rudolf Höss home is next to Auschwitz I, and then there's Auschwitz-Birkenau, basically the death camp that was in another place, but it was all really there together. What were some of the most interesting things that you learned in your research from the witness testimony, from the survivors, about the sounds that one would hear? Because obviously we hear the rumbling of the furnace, we hear the gunshots, we hear the screaming, we hear the SS men yelling in German.
There was a camp orchestra that was made up of very talented musicians, and they were made to play music when the work details marched in and out every day. And we hear it on the Rudolf's birthday scene with the kids in the paddling pool. You know, the orchestra were made. They normally used to play up the other end of the camp near the Auschwitz gate, which is at the other side of it. But for his birthday, and it's all historically accurate. You know, every line. You know, the line of Hedwig's Rudolf calls me the Queen of Auschwitz. All of these things were direct witness testimony lines that that he had heard, that people had attributed to say. And we had deep access to the Auschwitz Memorial Museum, and so we had a lot of opportunity to read in great detail and make a note of anything that was related to an event that I figured could have made a sound, basically. So there was a lot of it was to do with prisoner and guard interaction, and horrific things like people throwing themselves at the electric fence and choosing that and people describing the sound of that. And that was something, for example, that we took out because it was too sensationalized, or at least that's how it came across. And there were, but yeah, the camp orchestra was certainly a nice thing. There was more horrific things. The volley of 6 gunshots that you often hear is what happened. There were 80 executions a day in that period. By gunshot
11.
Alone. I mean,
right.
In Block 11, yeah, which was sort of
right.
So we recorded those guns like 150 meters away from where we were, in order to get the correct sound. But yeah, I mean, all of it was pretty horrible, I have to say. I don't know if I could say anything was particularly great or anything like that, but yeah, there's a lot of shocking, and awful sort of things to try and recreate.
In films about perpetrators, and a lot of those examples have shown perpetrators quite villainous, not us. So I wanted to avoid the artifice of cinema. I wanted to look at them more forensically.
He said, we don't want to make this like a movie set. There was no lighting, there was no film gear on the set, only like cameras.
So they wired the whole house with the cameras. Some of them were hidden, some of them were visible, but no camera people were behind it.
But that's the sense that you get, though, is that there was a tremendous amount of responsibility that clearly all of you had, and you all took such care to make sure that you guys were really paying respect to the history, which I found was really one of the most important elements of the film, is that everything felt like it was being approached with a sense of respect to the history. For
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. It felt very documentary, and and for various reasons, like the film one did have Mika's music on it for the first 50 minutes, and when we came to put the camp sounds on, it made the thing say it didn't really happen or something. It made it a dramatization, and similarly, if we put any acting on of background voices that sounded remotely acted, they stood out like a sore thumb immediately. And also the soundscape was we did a Dolby Atmos mix that was very big and around you, and we ended up paring that down to a very narrow stereo mix, is what you hear now, apart from Mika's score, which is completely in the room. But everything else was pared down to just to have more of a documentary and not to sensationalize, basically. So yes, it was definitely John is meticulous and rigorous, and everything was researched to a high degree, which is why things like the wheelbarrow look new. I mean, the camp was only built like a year or so before. Yeah. So.
And Mika Levy's score is fascinating because, again, it puts us into the film, it takes us out of the film, and then there's this scene with the red and the flower that basically it almost, I felt like it was a jolt, like it instantly just it wakes you up.
Yeah.
In a really unique way. But Jonathan said that the film itself rejected having a large amount of music. Can you talk about what that was like with the film having a ton of music versus when you started to pull it out and get to a more quiet center of that?
Yeah, certainly. Like I say, it was the process of editing film one included Mika and John and I and Paul, the picture editor, work together in a kind of a workshop space with different rooms. I'm actually virtual because I live in Brighton, which is 50 miles on the south coast of Brighton, but I'm there every day as a permanent presence with a big screen on the wall. And Mika was there and wrote music for the first 50 minutes, and it worked like a kind of palliative morphine to the awful images that you were seeing, and it was sort of a bit almost pastoral, but absolutely beautiful. And it was only in the process of then getting to the point of putting in the film two sound, the horrorscape, that it made a lie out of it, made Mika's score sound like it was a lie. And so we ended up removing all of it, and it was really heartrending because Mika put a lot of effort into that. And so yeah, the film existed without any score in it at all for a short period of time, and then we realized that as humans we absolutely need music and we needed a way in. And John came up with the idea of running an overture, and saying, Mika, please write us a piece of music that gets us in and allows people to put their bags down, turn their phone off, and and get ready for what they're about to watch, and also sort of to pull you back in time and those things. So the overture became, and it was fantastic. And a side effect was kind of use your ears, which was I suppose unintended, but heartily useful. And then it was in this room, and we were about 3 weeks before the Cannes premiere, and we all had a sense, as we do about the film, of what needs fixing. It was just that there was a heart missing from it, and the shot of the red bit in the middle didn't exist, and there was a shot of flowers. You went from the dog running off and Hedwig commanding the dog to go to the flowers, and then you cut straight to the kids at the address book. And I put in a recording I had of a prisoner being abused, and it kind of cut off and run out. And John said, can you loop the flowers? And then Paul, who was here, the picture editor, emailed me a little bit of red, and I put that on. He said, put that. And then Mika said, I've got an idea. And literally in the space of about 20 minutes, the four of us crafted this middle bit of the film that was like an extra minute or something. And we were like, and it was all done like on that machine there, which is a sound editing machine. But it was, it was extraordinary. It kind of, and that is a microcosm of how we all work. Everyone looking over each other's garden fence and saying, what you got going on? Can I help, kind of thing. And yeah, so again, that was a reaction to knowing that we needed more of Mika. And as humans, that kind of pops you out a bit. That film, it's sort of that moment does ask you to consider what you're watching a little bit in the middle of the film, doesn't it? And So it's really interesting how it works, and it's great because it obviously allowed Mika back in and allowed the things like the music in the night vision to have more of a kind of place in the film as a just another part of a tableau rather than to be a singular odd thing kind of thing is how I see it.
How it affects the acting. You definitely knew you were all alone with the history, with all the things that were present in that house that I cannot even explain.
It was really important, critical in fact, for the entire project to be as close to the truth as one could possibly get, to create present tense as an experience, and also allow the audience to be able to project themselves onto these people and see themselves.
The last time I saw the film, I was focusing on some of the musical cues, and I was imagining what would it be like if this was just a plain orchestral score. And it seems like it would just completely take you out, because instantly it adds a sense of sentimentality to it naturally, right?
Yeah,
and it seems like
totally.
Their musical approach was so much more powerful in that it really goes into something a lot more, just unusual.
Long before the script, I had a coffee with John, and he described to me the music on the end as Mika described it to him that they were thinking of writing. And so this was like 4 or 5 years ago. Voices scatting up like a chimney smoke, and sort of just crazy, and yeah, and I wanted to hear it for 4 years before I heard it, and then there was one day when Mika wrote it, and it was and John, it was funny. John I exist on a laptop in John's workspace, so he picked me up and he walked up to Mika's closed door and said, "Listen," and we were both there listening at the door to the creation of that end piece of music, and it's just absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, and you're right.
The climbing melodic notes and the descending, and oh my, it's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. Yeah, orchestra would not have been the right thing.
Can you talk a little bit about what Jonathan is like as a collaborator? Because as you were talking about, making a film and working with your team and working with the director is so much a conversation that's sort of never ending until you get to the final product. So what is he like as a filmmaker and as a collaborator? How would you describe him?
First of all, he's an incredibly lovely, kind, caring gentleman, and and a genius. And so it's just I feel honored to spend time with him. And he's immensely collaborative, and he wants to hear all of your ideas, and he and encourages you to definitely try whatever you like, and we'll explore things together. One thing that always surprises me about John is whenever I see the first rushes or material coming from the shoot, it's always far more different than I could possibly have imagined. Quite often when I see the nascent footage of a film, it's I've seen a storyboard or whatever, but because on every single creative decision that John Glazer makes, this is as I see it, I don't know, but he'll take, he can turn the whole film. He can say, I didn't realize it, but that's the interesting thing about what I'm looking at in this scene, or this use of camera, or this actor. And so he'll completely change on the day and make some, just work with what he's got to make it absolutely as different as possible, or unique. And that goes through absolutely everything that he does. So you are always striving to avoid, tropes and anything that we've kind of seen before. So it's arduous because you're trying a lot of stuff, but it's utterly rewarding because the material is pretty extraordinary.
The ending of the film is remarkable because, again, it for those that haven't seen the film, we cut from Rudolf Höss in 1944, or I guess the end of 43, all the way to modern day, where they're cleaning the camp, the museum, which at this point. Can you talk about putting that together and what your reaction was when you first saw that, and whether that was in the script, because it's such a powerful transition going from the past to the present and then going back to the past that leaves you with this overwhelming sense of what history means, today.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? I mean, when I first saw that picture edit from Rudolf looking back down the corridor to the pinhole, and and I absolutely read it as history catching up with him or looking back at him, and it's so powerful and so kind of unique. And yeah, I was really amazed, and I think it's really hard to stick a landing on a film for anybody. you can get so much of it right, but to get an ending right is really hard. And this one does. And yes, I think I'm pretty sure the museum, it was in the script that the museum would be cut. So I know obviously John shot the material at the time. So yeah, I can't remember if it was actually scripted or not. Sorry, but it was but yeah, it was definitely quite remarkable watching it, and yeah, and going to such a sort of, you know, natural soundscape and discovering where you are and the way that the film unfolds is a remarkable experience. But yeah.
Very easy to see these people committing genocide and thinking they're monsters. That's not me, I'm safe. But they didn't start as mass murderers. They started as boyfriend and girlfriend, having dreams about their future. What they wanted for themselves is not that dissimilar to what everybody wants for them. And the whole idea of this project was to be confronted by a reflection of ourselves on some level.
Every single take you were recording, you know, microphones all around the house because there were cameras positioned throughout this house. What is it like having that much material to go through? And thank God you had the subtitles created for you so that you could navigate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We had to have that. And it was, it's brilliant because it allowed us to follow the action around the house. So, you know, I've got a screen full of tracks and I can mix between the different microphone positions and create a seamless sort of blend of really brilliant natural sound. You know, the house was a real house. Often a film set will have a concrete floor that looks concrete but made of rubber, or the walls will be thin and the doors won't sound correct. But this was properly built for the exact reason of sounding correct and being you know, habitable. Really, it would have been. But you know, it's all about realism, really, isn't it, with John? And so yes, the house absolutely sounded exactly as you would want it to. So although we actually recorded all sorts of Foley, you know, for a lot of the stuff in the house, we didn't need to use it. And it was having all that enormous amount of sound, I guess, predominantly allowed John and I to spend about, you know, probably 2 or 3 months alone, just listening to all the different tracks of all the different takes and making a library of additional, you know, dog barks, baby cries, the voice of someone in another room, you know, all those things, and cars passing and stuff like that, so that we could go through and give a sense of real immersion. You know, because of the nature of the picture editing and the sort of surveillance style of constant mid-shot, cutting to mid-shot, without that could be disorienting without a steady flow of sound, you know. So I think it's, for the most part, a lot the sound that gives you your sense of where you are in the house, kind of thing.
What was the journey like getting to the constant sounds? For example, the low end sound that we hear a lot of the film, which in many ways, it's not just one, it sort of transitions and it evolves throughout the film as we cut to different locations too. Like when we cut to Rudolf and his son on the horse as they're going around the camp, and the sound evolves. How did you get to those constant sounds, and what were those actual raw recordings?
Yeah, the constant sound we started off playing with. It was basically something I was working on Nope, and I came back home for a week, and John had just started the picture edit, and he said, "Oh, one thing can you do for me?" And he sent me the picture of Hans, the boy on the bunk, mimicking a sound that he was hearing out of his window of the crematoria. And he said, "Can you make the sound of that crematorium?" And so I did, with some fire and pipes and things like that, and a microphone. And yeah, so I made that sound and then laid it up and made it into a 15-minute one that was constant and had knocking sounds, and it sounded like a sort of more working crematoria with a sort of mechanical function to it. And then I laid it up into a slightly more constant, more abstract soil of the place thing. And anyway, and so John, you know, he texted me back, "That's brilliant, you know, it creates a juxtaposition on that scene, that's perfect." And we only had it on that scene. And then again, when the mother looks out of the window at night and you see the room kind of illuminated with the red glow. But it was, we then had a test screening, and Chris Oddy, the production designer, came down, and it was just for, you know, us to watch the film through, not testing with any audience really. but he said to me at the end of it, you know, you've made the whole place it sounds quite like a country park. You know, it's you know, don't forget, it's really industrial. It was a enormous camp and so John and I took that thought back to the edit room, and John said, why don't you try that sound across the whole film? You know, like, this is what we're saying. And again, that was only a couple of months before we finished. And it obviously, you know, we then had a screening with A24 Films and a few other people, and it was such a, you know, a leap for I suppose for the way the film worked, you know, to have that constant reminder there that they are ignoring it was, it was an enormous uptick in the sort of power of the message, I think. So yeah, it was surprising.
Somebody said something so fascinating about the mix, and I don't remember whether it was Jonathan or whether it was your producer. Basically, the film orients you as you're watching it to the sounds. Can you talk about? It's a fascinating, you know, part of experiencing the movie.
It's a really weird phenomenon. Yeah, we sat in this room, and in order to mix it, we had to, you know, you go through a mix, and you know, you take it. This day we're going to do 10 minutes, then the next 10 minutes. But in order to get to the point we wanted to play to, you know, we had to play up to that point in order to adjust our ears, because yeah, exactly, if we came in on Wednesday morning and started the film 30 minutes in to work on that section, the first time we did that, I thought everything was wrong, and I thought someone had pushed the buttons on the desk at the cleaner or something, and you know, and it was a mistake, but it really wasn't. It was literally, you know, as humans, I guess, to an extent, like the Höss family, you know, you dial it out, you subdue it, and that's exactly what happened.
One of the amazing things about really the two films this year that the sound has been such an integral part of the experience for me is, of course, you know, your extraordinary film and Christopher Nolan's film, Oppenheimer, is the way in which the sound isn't just the sound is the story. The sound is integral to understanding the characters that you know, both of these films are telling. You know, with Oppenheimer, you're hearing the foot stomping, which is his psyche, brilliant. Basically thinking of the past.
I see myself primarily as a storyteller, and I happen to be the storyteller who wears the sound designer cap. And I think that's essential for anyone working on a film to have that kind of mandate with themselves, because otherwise you're going to end up putting in all the really glossy sound design sounds that you think are cool or something like that. You know, it doesn't work. Yeah. So, my goodness, yeah, the second film I did with Yorgos was called The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and we just got to the point where he'd finished picture editing. We were about to do 4 months of sound work together.
Good afternoon. You must be Martin.
That's right. You must be Anna.
That's right.
I brought you some little gifts.
That's very kind of you.
It's a keyring with a musical note on it for Kim.
And he came in on the first day and said, I'm really sorry, but I've got to go because Emma Stone has just come free and we're going to go and shoot The Favourite immediately. And so you're just going to have to do it by yourself. And I couldn't, he wouldn't come down at all. And the first time he heard the mix was at the Cannes premiere. And so during that process of 4 months on my own, I absolutely learned that rather than spending a whole lifetime of giving a director 3 options, I then had to recognize within myself what the one that worked was, you know, and that is all about, there is, you know, think about the story of the film, to keep your focus on that. That's absolutely the goal. So yeah, definitely, I would say storytelling.
And I would imagine, I mean, you could see it in a lot of the behind the scenes footage, again, talking about The Favourite, but you almost are directing a unit. You're directing the unit of sound and, you know, going out and getting all these raw sounds, bringing them together into your studio, and then building the film, the sound world from there.
And we add the cleaned up dialogue and we start to develop sound ideas, and those ideas hopefully stick. The picture edit is done in a left, centre, right format so that we can export from that at any point a great version for any test screening. And then as we add Foley, Fettle music and further define soundscape, crucially, we all work across a network, developing ideas and the mix as we go, checking this weekly in a theatre, so that the actual final mix, which is often the first time sound departments meet, becomes a mastering session.
Is there one memory that you have from The Lobster, Killing of a Sacred Deer, The Favourite, one of these films where there was one particular sound element that you worked so hard to get right? Because I'm thinking about The Favourite and thinking about the reverb of the steps.
I'm ready for the Russian ambassador.
Is there one memory that you have from one of those films?
Definitely. I mean, reverb I love playing with, because so often I'll see a film and someone has said there's a person in a room, so put reverb on, and you just hear reverb on voice or feet or whatever. But always reverb is the product of a hard surface with sound reflecting on it. So for me, it's all about making a clip of reverb of the source sound and deciding that it will come from that and positioning it specifically. And then if there's another hard surface, then I'll put another one there. And then, so yeah, I mean, I obsess over really careful reverb placement and having a variety of reverbs, because real life is about many different time spaces of reverb. So yeah, totally that. What in the whole, the squishing of the frog in Poor Things was surprisingly difficult for a half a second moment, but and the bubbling of the bubbles of Godwin Baxter's external digestive system kept my children very happy with a sink full of water and a hose pipe and some washing up liquid.
We must experience everything, not just the good, but degradation.
Shall we sing?
Horror. Sadness.
With a film like Poor Things, where you and Yorgos are, I mean, you're building a world that doesn't exist. It's an alternate reality set in some fantasy parallel universe. Is that exciting for you, going into a world where everything seems to be made, seems to be created? And I mean, obviously you're dealing with such a brilliant central performance of Emma Stone, who brings it all together. Yeah, completely. I mean, it's so fun. All the sets are so surreal, and you know, it's the first set build film that Yorgos has done. So normally I'd go out into the real world and say, we're in a park, I'll record that park, and I'll go to the same park that they're recording on, but I'll go the day after the crew are there. So you can't hear catering trucks. But yeah, so in this, it was all about finding sound that was abnormal enough to look normal, you know, to sound normal over strange images, and such a really, you know, radically strong performance from Emma Stone. So yeah, it was, you know, and that's massively fun, and probably a bit harder than you'd think, because everything has to be, it's all sort of misplaced sound, really, but very carefully chosen. What is the one thing that you look forward to with every new film project? When a director comes to you and says, I'm working on this film, I'd love, obviously, for you to be a part of it again, like, you know, the next film that you're doing with Yorgos. What is that sense that you get from every single collaboration that keeps you constantly energetic about going into the next one and the next one?
I really do love the bit where I think I'm a kind of frustrated music producer, and so I love the bit when I've got the film so locked down that the sound, and essentially the sound is always the final bit, so you tend to have a graded picture, even, you know, everything's kind of finished up. So you've got the whole film there in front of you, you're in a nice big room like this, and I loop tiny little sections, you know, 1 second or 3 second or like a 1 bar piece of this, and I just go through the whole film over a period of a week, and really, really in fine detail, fine tune exactly how every single sound is working on a very sort of you know, reduce noise, attenuate you know, change the pitch of it or the rhythm or everything, and just absolutely make sure that the craft is, you know, there's nothing that I didn't want to do, basically, to make it sound even, you know, even more slick somehow. That's the bit I really like, because the pressure's off then. You've done it, you're just making it sound even better, kind of thing.
If you had one piece of advice to people that are coming into this industry or that are working in this industry and are, you know, we've spent a long time on this chat talking about, you know, these incredible relationships that you have with filmmakers and with your team. What's the biggest lesson you've learned? Or what's the biggest piece of advice, I would say, that you would give to people coming into this industry or that are working in it, that, you know, just want to maintain these really tight relationships with the people around them?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it has to be about passion for me. I think, you know, I was told, given good advice, find something you enjoy doing and then figure out how to get paid for it. And so for me, it's all about making sure you are doing something you really enjoy, and then really follow, you know, the details of discover what you really like doing. and then your natural passion will drive you forward, because that enthusiasm will so clearly show to anyone you meet, basically. So I think that has to be a key tenet. Love what you're doing, or don't do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I told you at the beginning, I've seen The Zone of Interest 3 times on 3 different occasions, and each time I have just an overwhelming amount of respect to the people that put it together and that spent dedicated so much time to bringing the film to life, because it is so unique, but it's also so important. I mean, seeing this film, I think, it's a part of remembering history and keeping history alive. And your sound is an absolutely integral part of that. So I just want to congratulate you on your work, and for the Academy Award nomination. I wish you luck.
Thank you, Ashton.
And I'm so excited for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it is an important piece of film, and I love that it's basically saying, humans did this to other humans. So let's be careful and try and weed that out amongst ourselves. So I hope the message gets through.